The morning of May 15, 2018, started like any other Tuesday in our suburban Connecticut home. But this wasn't any ordinary Tuesday. This was the day that would crystallize everything I had suspected about my place in our family hierarchy for the past 18 years. I was Sarah Mitchell, 18 years old, and in exactly 6 days, would walk across the stage at Westfield High School to receive my diploma as valedictorian of my graduating class. 6 days to receive recognition for 4 years of relentless academic pursuit, countless nights studying until 2 a.m., maintaining my 4.7 GPA and securing my place as the first Mitchell to attend an Ivy League university. Harvard Medical School had already accepted me for their pre-med track with a partial scholarship, an achievement that should have been the crown jewel of our family's accomplishments. But as I sat at our kitchen island that morning, reviewing my valedictorian speech, I couldn't shake the growing dread that had been building in my stomach for weeks. The source of my anxiety sat directly across from me, my 24-year-old sister Jessica, frantically scrolling through wedding vendor emails while video calling her maid of honor about dress alterations. Jessica had always been the golden child of our family, the one who could do no wrong, whose every whim was catered to, whose dreams were funded without question. Where I was quiet and studious, Jessica was vivacious and social. Where I had to work part-time jobs to afford my own car, Jessica received a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday. Where my academic achievements were met with lukewarm, "That's nice, honey," responses, Jessica's mediocre college graduation had been celebrated with a family vacation to Europe. But the most glaring example of this favoritism was unfolding right before my eyes. Jessica's wedding to her fiancé Brandon was scheduled for May 21st, exactly the same day as my high school graduation. "Mom, the florist says they can't guarantee the peonies will be available in the exact shade of blush pink we selected," Jessica said, her voice carrying that slight whine that had always gotten her whatever she wanted. "Can you call them and work your magic? You know how persuasive you can be." Linda Mitchell, my 52-year-old mother who worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, immediately set down her coffee mug and reached for her phone. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll call them right now and make sure they understand how important this day is." The phrase, "how important this day is," hit me like a physical slap. I looked up from my speech notes, which contained carefully crafted words about resilience, determination, and the importance of family support in achieving one's dreams. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach, "could we talk about the graduation situation? I know we've been avoiding the topic, but it's this Saturday, and I need to know how many tickets to reserve for family." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica stopped scrolling through her phone. Linda froze with her coffee mug halfway to her lips. Even the morning news anchor on our kitchen television seemed to pause dramatically. Robert Mitchell, my father, chose that moment to enter the kitchen, adjusting his navy blue tie and grabbing his travel mug from the counter. At 55, he was a successful corporate lawyer who prided himself on his logical approach to problem solving. Surely he would be the voice of reason in this increasingly uncomfortable situation. "Dad," I continued, looking directly at him, "I need 4 tickets for Saturday's ceremony. The school requires an exact count by tomorrow." Robert exchanged a look with Linda, one of those wordless spousal communications that had been perfected over 26 years of marriage. It was the look that said, "You handle this, I'll back you up." "Sarah, sweetheart," Linda began, and I immediately knew from her tone that I wasn't going to like what came next. "We've been meaning to talk to you about this, but with all the wedding preparations, things have been so chaotic." "The wedding preparations for Jessica's wedding that's on the same day as my graduation," I said, my voice taking on an edge I had never used with my parents before. "Now, Sarah," Robert interjected, setting down his travel mug and fixing me with what he probably thought was a paternal but firm expression. "We need to be realistic about this situation. Jessica's wedding has been planned for 8 months. The venue was booked, deposits were paid, invitations were sent to 200 guests. This isn't something that can be moved or rescheduled. And my graduation was scheduled for the entire school year," I replied, feeling my carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "It's not like this is a surprise. Every senior knows that graduation is the 3rd Saturday in May. It's been the third Saturday in May for the past 50 years at Westfield High. Jessica finally looked up from her phone, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her features. But it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. "Sarah, you know how important this wedding is to me," she said, her voice taking on that little girl quality that had always melted our parents' resolve. "Brandon's entire family is flying in from California. His grandmother is 93 years old, and this might be her last chance to see a family wedding. We can't ask 200 people to change their plans because..." "Because what?" I interrupted, standing up so abruptly that my barstool scraped against the hardwood floor. "Because your little sister's graduation doesn't matter? Because 4 years of straight A's and getting into Harvard doesn't warrant the same consideration as your party?" "It's not a party, Sarah," Jessica shot back, her own voice rising. "It's my wedding day. It's supposed to be the most important day of my life. And graduation is supposed to be one of the most important days of mine." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of our neighbor's lawnmower starting up outside. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had learned long ago that crying in front of my family was seen as manipulation, while Jessica's tears were always viewed as genuine distress requiring immediate attention. Robert cleared his throat, a sound that usually preceded his final word on family matters. "Sarah, I think you're being a bit dramatic about this. Graduation is certainly an achievement, and we're proud of you, but it's not like we're missing your wedding or something equally significant." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Not equally significant. My 4 years of academic excellence, my acceptance to Harvard, my position as valedictorian, none of it was equally significant to Jessica's wedding day. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, my voice now completely calm in the way that comes just before a storm. "You're choosing not to attend my graduation ceremony because Jessica couldn't be bothered to check the school calendar before picking her wedding date." "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell," Linda said, using my full name in the tone that had intimidated me as a child, "that is enough. You're being incredibly selfish right now. This is about more than just one day. This is about family priorities and understanding that sometimes we have to make difficult choices." "You're right, Mom," I said, reaching for my backpack and car keys. "This is about family priorities. And I think I finally understand exactly where I rank on that list." I walked toward the garage, but turned back at the kitchen doorway. My parents were standing together now, presenting a united front against their difficult younger daughter. Jessica had returned to her phone, already dismissing the conversation as resolved in her favor. "Just so you know," I said, "I'll be giving the valedictorian speech on Saturday. I'll be talking about the people who believed in me and supported me through high school. It's going to be a very short speech." I left for school that morning with my parents' silence echoing in my ears. During first period AP Literature, while we discussed the themes of family loyalty in King Lear, I made a decision that would define the next chapter of my life. If my family couldn't be bothered to show up for my achievements, then I would achieve so much that their absence would become impossible to ignore. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. My parents continued their wedding preparations as if our conversation had never happened. Jessica alternated between ignoring me completely and making passive-aggressive comments about how some people couldn't be happy for other special moments. I continued going to school, finishing final exams, and preparing my valedictorian speech with a determination that surprised even me. On Thursday evening, 2 days before graduation, I found my mother in her home office, which she had temporarily converted into Wedding Command Central. Fabric samples, catering menus, and seating charts covered every available surface. She was on the phone with the wedding photographer, discussing the specific angles for capturing Jessica's entrance. "Mom," I said quietly from the doorway, "can we talk?" She held up one finger, indicating I should wait while she finished her call. After 5 more minutes of discussing lighting requirements and backup locations for photos, she finally hung up. "What is it, Sarah?" "I'm really swamped with last-minute details right now." "I wanted to give you one more chance to change your mind," I said. "About graduation. I know you and Dad have made your decision, but I thought maybe if I explained what this day means to me." "Sarah, We've been through this, Linda interrupted, not even looking up from the seating chart she was annotating. The decision has been made. Jessica's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event that took months of planning and thousands of dollars. Your graduation is a ceremony that lasts 2 hours, and you'll get your diploma regardless of whether we're there. You're right, I said. I'll get my diploma regardless. But I wanted you to know that I'll also remember this choice regardless. For the rest of my life, I'll remember that when I achieved the highest academic honor my school offers, when I got accepted to Harvard, when I needed my family support the most, you chose Jessica's party over me. Linda finally looked up from her papers, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been regret cross her face. But it was quickly replaced by irritation. Sarah, you're 18 years old, but you're acting like a child. This is not about choosing Jessica over you. This is about being practical and understanding that some commitments can't be changed. Like the commitment you made 18 years ago to be my parent? The question hung between us like a challenge. Linda's face flushed red, and I could see her struggle between anger and guilt. I am being your parent, she said finally. I'm trying to teach you that the world doesn't revolve around you, and that sometimes you have to accept disappointment gracefully. Is that what you call this? Graceful acceptance? I call it growing up. I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me, something that felt like a door closing quietly but permanently. You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right. It is time for me to grow up. Thanks for the lesson. I left her office and went to my room, where I spent the next hour rewriting my valedictorian speech. The original version had been full of gratitude to family, teachers, and community. The new version was about independence, self-reliance, and the strength that comes from standing alone. Friday afternoon, the day before graduation, I received a text message from Jessica. Sarah, I hope you understand that this isn't personal. I love you, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Maybe we can celebrate your graduation at Sunday brunch or something? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thanks for the offer, but I think I'll pass. I'm learning that some celebrations can't be rescheduled. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect May weather that makes Connecticut look like a postcard. Clear blue skies, gentle breeze, temperature in the low 70s, ideal graduation weather. I got dressed in my cap and gown alone in my room, adjusting the gold honor cords and valedictorian medal that marked me as the top academic achiever in my class. Downstairs, my parents were bustling around in preparation for Jessica's wedding. Linda was on the phone with the caterer, Robert was loading gift boxes into his car, and Jessica was having a breakdown about whether her hair looked better in an updo or down. Sarah, you look lovely, Linda said, glancing up from her phone call. Take some pictures and text them to us, okay? We want to see everything. The casual nature of her request, as if attending my graduation was as simple as taking a few selfies, crystallized everything I had been feeling. They wanted the appearance of caring without any of the actual effort or sacrifice. Sure, Mom, I said. I'll make sure you don't miss anything important. I drove myself to school, parked in the senior lot for the last time, and joined my classmates in the designated staging area. As I looked around at my fellow graduates taking pictures with their families, receiving last-minute hugs and words of encouragement, I felt a profound loneliness that was somehow also liberating. Marcus Williams, my longtime academic rival who had finished second in our class, approached me with his parents in tow. Sarah. There's our valedictorian, he said warmly. Mom, Dad, this is Sarah Mitchell, the genius who beat me by .03 grade points. Marcus's parents, Dr. Angela Williams and Professor James Williams, both smiled warmly and congratulated me on my achievement. Dr. Williams, a pediatrician, was particularly interested in my plans for Harvard. Your parents must be incredibly proud, she said, looking around. Where are they? We'd love to meet them. The question that should have been simple hit me like a physical blow. I had practiced this moment, knowing it would come, but actually facing it was worse than I had anticipated. They couldn't make it today, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Family obligations. Something in my tone must have conveyed more than my words, because Dr. Williams's expression immediately softened with understanding. Well, their loss is our gain, she said firmly. You're welcome to sit with us for the ceremony if you'd like. No one should celebrate an achievement like this alone. I almost broke down right there in the school parking lot. The kindness from virtual strangers felt more meaningful than anything my own family had offered in weeks. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than they could possibly know. I'd really like that. The graduation ceremony was held on the football field, with rows of white folding chairs arranged on the artificial turf and a raised platform for the graduating class. As we processed in alphabetical order to pomp and circumstance, I scanned the bleachers looking for my family, even though I knew they wouldn't be there. Old habits die hard. Instead, I spotted Dr. and Professor Williams waving enthusiastically from the third row, holding a "Congratulations, graduates" sign that they had clearly brought for Marcus but were now using to cheer for me as well. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that I had to blink back tears. When it came time for the valedictorian speech, I approached the podium with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Looking out at the sea of faces, graduates, families, teachers, administrators, I took a deep breath and began. 4 years ago, we walked into Westfield High School as children, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. Today, we leave as adults, shaped not just by what we've learned in classrooms, but by the lessons life has taught us about resilience, independence, and the true meaning of support. I paused, letting my eyes find Dr. and Professor Williams in the crowd. We often think that success is about having people believe in us, but sometimes the most important lesson is learning to believe in ourselves when no one else will. Sometimes the greatest achievements come not from those who cheered from the sidelines, but from the determination we found within ourselves when the bleachers felt empty. The speech continued for another 5 minutes, touching on themes of personal growth, academic excellence, and the importance of defining success for ourselves rather than seeking validation from others. When I concluded with, "Today, we don't just graduate from high school, we graduate into the fullness of our own potential," the crowd erupted in applause. As I walked back to my seat, several of my classmates reached out to squeeze my hand or pat my shoulder. Mrs. Henderson, my AP chemistry teacher, was wiping tears from her eyes. Even the usually stoic Principal Robertson nodded at me with what looked like approval. After the ceremony, as families reunited on the field for photos and celebrations, Dr. and Professor Williams found me gathering my things. "Sarah, that was one of the most moving graduation speeches I've ever heard," Dr. Williams said. "You have a gift for turning pain into purpose." "Thank you for including me with your family today," I replied. "It meant more than you know." "Anytime, sweetheart," Professor Williams added. "Marcus has told us so much about your academic achievements over the years. If you ever need anything at Harvard, advice, connections, or just someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to reach out." As I drove home that evening, still wearing my cap and gown, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and empowerment. My phone had buzzed several times with congratulatory texts from classmates, teachers, and family friends who had watched the ceremony. But there was nothing from my parents, who were presumably still celebrating Jessica's wedding reception. When I pulled into our driveway at 8 p.m., the house was dark except for the front porch light. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Sarah, we hope graduation went well. Staying at the hotel with Jessica and Brandon tonight. See you tomorrow. Love, Mom and Dad." I read the note 3 times, each time feeling the casual dismissal more acutely. Hope graduation went well, as if it were a dentist appointment rather than the culmination of 4 years of academic excellence. That night, I sat in my room surrounded by graduation cards from teachers, classmates, and family friends, but none from my own parents or sister. As I opened each card and read the heartfelt congratulations, I made another decision that would shape my future. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. From now on, I would achieve for myself, and let the results speak louder than their silence ever could. I had no idea that this decision would lead me down a path that would ultimately give me the most satisfying revenge of all, the kind of success that would force them to acknowledge what they had chosen to miss. The summer after graduation passed in a haze of isolation and determination that would define the next phase of my life. While Jessica honeymooned in Tuscany and my parents returned to their normal routines as if nothing had changed, I worked 3 jobs to save money for Harvard and to prove to myself that I could survive entirely without their support. My morning started at 5 a.m. at Henderson's Family Restaurant, where I waited tables during the breakfast rush. The work was demanding, memorizing complex orders, managing difficult customers, staying on my feet for 6 hours straight, but it taught me resilience and the value of every dollar I earned. My afternoon shifts were at the Westfield Public Library, where I helped with summer reading programs and gained experience that would later prove invaluable in my academic pursuits. Evenings, I tutored younger students in mathematics and science, building a small but steady client base of families who appreciated my patience and expertise. By the time August arrived, I had saved nearly $8,000, enough to cover my first semester's expenses at Harvard without asking my parents for a single cent. More importantly, I had spent 3 months learning to rely entirely on myself, developing a work ethic that would serve me throughout medical school and beyond. The day before I left for Cambridge, my parents finally acknowledged my impending departure with what they probably considered a generous gesture. "Sarah," my father said over dinner, "we've decided to give you $5,000 for college expenses. We know we missed graduation, and we want to make sure you have everything you need at Harvard." The offer was presented with the expectation of gratitude, as if money could retroactively repair the damage of their absence on the most important day of my high school career. I looked at both of them, noting how they sat together in solidarity, waiting for my appreciation. "Thank you, but I won't be needing it," I said calmly, cutting into my chicken breast with surgical precision. "I've saved enough to cover my expenses." Linda and Robert exchanged that familiar look, the one that said they weren't sure whether to be impressed or annoyed by my independence. "Sarah, there's no need to be prideful about this," Linda said. "We're offering to help you because we love you and want you to succeed." "If you wanted to help me succeed, you would have been at my graduation," I replied, my voice even and matter-of-fact. "I appreciate the offer, but I've learned that I can't depend on support that might disappear when something more important comes along." The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware against plates and the distant sound of our neighbor's television through the open windows. Harvard University in September was everything I had dreamed it would be: intellectually challenging, culturally diverse, and filled with some of the most ambitious and talented students in the world. My dormitory room in Canada Hall was small but adequate, with a view of Harvard Yard that never failed to remind me of how far I had come from that devastating morning in our kitchen. My pre-med coursework was rigorous from day one. Organic chemistry, molecular biology, physics, statistics, each course demanded hours of study and complete dedication. While many of my classmates struggled with the transition from high school to college-level work, I thrived in the competitive environment. Years of academic self-reliance had prepared me for the independence required at Harvard. But it was during my first semester that I experienced something I hadn't expected: homesickness for a home that had never truly felt like home. Despite everything that had happened, I found myself missing my family, missing the idea of having people to share my achievements with, missing the warmth of unconditional support that I saw my dorm mates receiving from their families. My roommate, Amanda Chen, came from a Chinese-American family in San Francisco who called her every Sunday and sent care packages filled with homemade dumplings and encouraging notes. Watching Amanda's face light up during these calls, seeing her casual confidence that her family would always be proud of her, highlighted the emptiness in my own life. "Sarah, you never talk about your family," Amanda observed one evening as we studied together in our common room. "Are you okay? Like, is everything all right at home?" It was the first time anyone had asked me directly about my family situation, and I realized I had been carefully avoiding the topic for months. "It's complicated," I said, not looking up from my biology textbook. "We're not very close. But they must be proud of you being here, right? I mean, Harvard pre-med is incredible." I finally looked up at Amanda, whose genuine concern and confusion made me realize how abnormal my family dynamic really was. "They missed my high school graduation for my sister's wedding," I said simply. "That pretty much sums up our relationship." Amanda stared at me for a full 10 seconds before speaking again. "They missed your graduation? For a wedding that could have been any day?" "The wedding couldn't be moved because it would have been inconvenient for 200 guests," I explained, feeling that familiar knot of resentment tighten in my stomach. My graduation was apparently the less important commitment. "Sarah, That's really messed up, Amanda said, closing her own textbook and giving me her full attention. I can't imagine my parents missing my graduation for anything short of a medical emergency. That conversation marked the beginning of a friendship that would sustain me through the most challenging years of my academic career. Amanda became the sister I had always wanted, supportive, encouraging, genuinely interested in my success, and unfailingly loyal. Through her, I experienced what healthy family dynamics looked like, and it only reinforced my determination to build a life independent of my biological family's approval. As my first year at Harvard progressed, I maintained my grueling schedule of studying and working. I had secured a work-study position in the medical school's research lab, where I assisted graduate students with data collection for neurological studies. The work was fascinating and gave me insight into the cutting-edge research being conducted at one of the world's premier medical institutions. Dr. Patricia Morse, the lead researcher, was a brilliant neuroscientist who had spent decades studying traumatic brain injuries. Under her mentorship, I learned not just laboratory techniques, but the importance of persistence and precision in scientific inquiry. Sarah, Dr. Morse said to me one afternoon as we analyzed MRI scans, "You have an exceptional ability to focus on details without losing sight of the bigger picture. That's a rare gift in medicine." Her praise meant more to me than months of A's on exams because it came from someone who had no obligation to encourage me, who had earned her position through merit alone. Dr. Morse became my first professional mentor, showing me what was possible when intelligence met opportunity and hard work. During my sophomore year, I made the decision to accelerate my pre-med track by taking additional courses during summer sessions. While my classmates went home to family vacations and internships arranged through family connections, I stayed in Cambridge, taking advanced biochemistry and molecular genetics while continuing my research work with Dr. Morse. It was during this summer that I received my first direct contact from my family since leaving for college. Jessica called me in July, her voice bright with excitement about her new house in suburban Boston. "Sarah, guess what? Brandon got promoted to regional manager, and we just bought the most adorable colonial in Lexington. We're only 20 minutes from you. We should definitely get together for dinner sometime." The casual assumption that geographic proximity would automatically repair our relationship was so characteristic of Jessica that I almost laughed. "That's great news about Brandon's promotion," I said, genuinely meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't wish my sister ill. "How are you enjoying married life?" "Oh, it's wonderful. Brandon is such an amazing husband, and we're already talking about starting a family. Mom thinks we should wait another year or two, but I'm ready to be a mom." Jessica chattered on for another 10 minutes about decorating plans, neighborhood amenities, and her part-time job at an interior design firm. Not once did she ask about my studies, my research, or how I was adjusting to college life. "So anyway," she said as the conversation began winding down, "we should really get together soon. Brandon would love to meet you properly, and I want to hear all about Harvard." "I'm pretty busy with summer courses and research," I said. "But maybe sometime." "Sarah, you work too hard. College is supposed to be fun too, you know. When was the last time you did something just for enjoyment?" The question irritated me more than it should have. Easy enough to prioritize fun when your education was fully funded by parents who attended every milestone event. Easy enough to suggest relaxation when you had a safety net of family support to catch you if you failed. "I enjoy my research," I said. "And I enjoy learning. Different people find fulfillment in different things." After we hung up, I realized that Jessica had never once mentioned our parents or acknowledged what had happened at graduation. In her mind, enough time had passed that we should all just move forward as if nothing had occurred. The ability to simply forget hurtful behavior was apparently another privilege that came with being the favored child. My junior year at Harvard marked a turning point in both my academic achievements and my personal growth. I had been selected for an exclusive research internship at Massachusetts General Hospital, working directly with cardiac surgeons on innovative treatment protocols for congenital heart defects. The position was typically reserved for medical students, but Dr. Morse had recommended me based on my exceptional research skills and dedication. Working in a world-class hospital environment was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. I observed surgeries that saved lives, participated in research that would be published in prestigious medical journals, and learned from physicians who were pioneers in their fields. Every day reinforced my decision to pursue medicine and showed me what was possible with complete dedication to excellence. It was also during my junior year that I met David Park, a Harvard Medical School student who was working on his residency applications. David was brilliant, kind, and came from a Korean-American family that had supported his medical ambitions since childhood. Through our friendship, which gradually developed into something deeper, I experienced what it felt like to be with someone whose family celebrated academic achievement rather than viewing it as inconvenient or prideful. "My parents are coming to Boston next month for my thesis defense," David mentioned one evening as we studied together in the medical library. "They want to take us both out to dinner afterward. I've told them so much about your research work." The casual invitation to meet his parents, presented as an obvious next step rather than a complicated emotional minefield, highlighted how different our backgrounds were. David couldn't imagine that meeting someone's parents might be anxiety-provoking rather than exciting. "That's really nice of them," I said, meaning it. "I'd like that." David's parents, Dr. James Park and Professor Susan Park, were everything I had imagined supportive academic parents would be. They asked thoughtful questions about my research, expressed genuine admiration for my achievements, and treated me with the respect accorded to someone whose accomplishments spoke for themselves. "Sarah, David has told us about your work on cardiac research as an undergraduate," Dr. Park said over dinner at a small restaurant in Harvard Square. "That level of opportunity usually isn't available until medical school. You must be exceptionally talented." "She's being modest," David interjected. "Sarah's research has already contributed to 2 published papers, and she's only a junior." The pride in David's voice when he spoke about my achievements was something I had never experienced from my own family. Even more striking was how his parents received this information, not with skepticism or the need to diminish it, but with genuine appreciation for academic excellence. "You must be very proud," Professor Park said to me directly. "Your family must be thrilled with your success at Harvard." The question I had been dreading all evening finally arrived. I felt David's questioning look and realized this was the first time my family's situation would be directly addressed in front of him. "My family and I have different perspectives on academic achievement," I said carefully. "They're supportive in their own way." Dr. Park nodded thoughtfully, and I had the distinct impression that he understood more than my diplomatic response had revealed. As my senior year began, I faced the daunting process of applying to medical schools while maintaining my research work and completing my undergraduate degree. The Medical College Admission Test, MCAT, consumed months of preparation, and my applications required essays about my motivation for pursuing medicine and my long-term career goals. Writing those essays forced me to articulate something I had been avoiding: how my family's rejection had shaped my determination to succeed. The prompt asked about overcoming challenges, and I found myself writing honestly about learning to define success independently of external validation. "The most important lesson of my academic career," I wrote in my personal statement, "has been learning that the pursuit of excellence is intrinsically valuable, regardless of who witnesses or celebrates that excellence. Medicine appeals to me not just as an intellectual challenge, but as a field where the work itself provides meaning and where success is measured by lives improved rather than applause received." The essay felt like a declaration of independence, not just from my family's expectations, but from the need for anyone's approval beyond my own satisfaction with work well done. My MCAT scores came back in November, 525 out of 528, placing me in the 99th percentile of test takers nationwide. Combined with my undergraduate GPA of 3.95, my research publications, and my clinical experience at Mass General, I had built the kind of medical school application that admissions committees would find irresistible. As acceptance letters began arriving in the spring of my senior year, each one felt like vindication of the choice I had made that morning in our kitchen. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Yale, the most prestigious medical programs in the country were offering me positions in their incoming classes. But the letter that meant the most to me came from Dr. Patricia Morse, who had been accepted to chair the neurology department at Stanford Medical School and wanted me to consider joining her research team as a medical student. "Sarah," she wrote, "in 15 years of mentoring students, I have rarely encountered someone with your combination of intellectual rigor and emotional resilience. I believe you have the potential not just to be an excellent physician, but to be a leader in medical research who will influence the field for decades to come." Reading her letter, I realized that I had accomplished something my 18-year-old self could never have imagined. I had built a professional identity and academic reputation that existed entirely independent of my family's recognition or support. I was no longer Sarah Mitchell, the daughter whose graduation wasn't important enough to attend. I was Sarah Mitchell, the medical student whose research was being published, whose mentors were recommending her for prestigious positions, whose achievements spoke for themselves. But as satisfying as this independence was, I couldn't entirely suppress the part of me that still longed to share these victories with family members who cared enough to celebrate them. That longing would soon be replaced by something much more powerful, the determination to achieve success so undeniable that even they would have to acknowledge what they had chosen to overlook. The stage was being set for a confrontation I didn't yet know was coming, one that would give me the opportunity to return the gift they had given me 4 years earlier, the chance to experience being excluded from life's most important moments. Medical school at Stanford represented a complete transformation of my identity from a student seeking approval to a professional commanding respect. The intense academic environment, combined with the clinical rotations that exposed me to life and death situations daily, forged a confidence I had never possessed before. This was no longer about proving myself to family members who would never appreciate my achievements. This was about becoming the physician and researcher I was meant to be. My first year of medical school was a relentless cycle of lectures, laboratory work, and studying that made my undergraduate years seem leisurely by comparison. Anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, each course built upon the previous ones, creating a comprehensive understanding of human biology that would form the foundation of my medical practice. While some of my classmates struggled with the transition from undergraduate work to the intensity of medical education, I thrived in the demanding environment. Dr. Patricia Morse had kept her promise to include me in her research team at Stanford, and working under her continued mentorship opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Our research on traumatic brain injury rehabilitation was groundbreaking, combining traditional neurological approaches with innovative cognitive therapy techniques that were showing remarkable results in patient recovery. "Sarah, I want you to present our preliminary findings at the American Academy of Neurology conference next spring," Dr. Morse announced during one of our weekly research meetings. "This will be a significant platform for showcasing our work to the national medical community." The opportunity to present research at a national conference as a first-year medical student was virtually unprecedented, but Dr. Morse's confidence in my abilities had grown to the point where she trusted me with increasingly important responsibilities. As I prepared for the presentation, I realized that I had unconsciously been building toward this moment for years, the chance to stand before my peers and demonstrate expertise that had been earned through merit alone. The irony wasn't lost on me that my first major professional presentation would occur almost exactly 5 years after my high school graduation, which my family had deemed insufficiently important to attend. The conference was held in San Francisco, just an hour's drive from Stanford's campus, but it felt like stepping into an entirely different world. The convention center was filled with thousands of neurologists, researchers, and medical students from around the globe, all gathered to share the latest advances in brain science and neurological treatment. My presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference, in a session focused on innovative rehabilitation techniques. As I stood backstage, reviewing my notes one final time, I felt a calm confidence that surprised me. This wasn't the nervous energy I had experienced before high school presentations or college exams. This was the steady assurance of someone who knew their material thoroughly and believed completely in its value. "Ladies and gentlemen," the session moderator announced, "our next presenter is Sarah Mitchell, a first-year medical student at Stanford University School of Medicine, working under the supervision of Dr. Patricia Morse. She'll be discussing breakthrough approaches to cognitive rehabilitation in traumatic brain injury patients." Walking onto the stage, I looked out at an audience of several hundred medical professionals and felt, for the first time in my life, that I was exactly where I belonged. These people weren't here out of family obligation or social courtesy. They were here because they genuinely wanted to learn about advances in neurological medicine. My 20-minute presentation covered our research methodology, patient outcomes, and implications for future treatment protocols. The data was compelling. Patients receiving our combined approach showed 40% better cognitive recovery rates compared to traditional rehabilitation methods. When I concluded with recommendations for implementing these techniques in clinical practice, the audience erupted in sustained applause. During the question and answer session that followed, I fielded inquiries from senior neurologists, department chairs, and research directors with a confidence that felt entirely natural. One particularly respected physician, Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Johns Hopkins, approached me after the session. "Ms. Mitchell, that was one of the most impressive presentations I've seen from a medical student," she said, shaking my hand warmly. "Dr. Morse mentioned that you're still in your first year. Have you considered what specialty you'd like to pursue?" "Neurosurgery," I replied without hesitation. "I want to combine surgical intervention with the rehabilitation research I'm doing now." Dr. Rodriguez smiled approvingly. "Ambitious and well-reasoned. I'll be watching your career with great interest." As word of my successful presentation spread through the conference, I found myself invited to dinners with prominent physicians, included in discussions about future research collaborations, and offered summer internships at prestigious medical centers. In 3 days, I had gone from being a promising medical student to being recognized as a rising star in neurological medicine. The validation I received at that conference was unlike anything I had ever experienced. These accomplished professionals were responding to my work, my ideas, my potential, not because they were obligated to encourage me, but because they genuinely saw something exceptional in what I was contributing to their field. Flying back to Stanford, I felt a profound shift in how I saw myself and my future. I was no longer building a career in spite of my family's lack of support. I was building a career that would stand as a testament to what was possible when talent met opportunity and relentless hard work. During my second year of medical school, as I began clinical rotations that put me directly into patient care situations, my confidence in my chosen field only grew stronger. Working with attending physicians in neurology and neurosurgery, I consistently impressed supervisors with my diagnostic skills, my patient rapport, and my ability to remain calm under pressure. Dr. Michael Chen, the chief of neurosurgery at Stanford Hospital, became another important mentor during my surgery rotations. Watching him perform complex brain operations with precision and composure inspired me to push myself toward even higher levels of excellence. "Sarah," he said after I had successfully assisted in my first craniotomy, "you have natural surgical instincts that can't be taught. With proper training, you could become one of the leading neurosurgeons of your generation." Comments like these from respected physicians began to build a reputation that preceded me throughout the medical center. Other students sought my help with difficult cases, residents requested me for their surgical teams, and attending physicians specifically asked for me to be assigned to their services. But it was during my third year that I received the opportunity that would truly elevate my profile in the medical community. Dr. Morse and Dr. Chen collaborated on a research project that combined their expertise, a surgical technique for implanting devices that would enhance cognitive rehabilitation in patients with severe brain injuries. "Sarah, we want you to be the lead researcher on this project," Dr. Morse announced during what I thought would be a routine research meeting. "Your work has shown such innovative thinking that we believe you're the right person to bridge the gap between surgical intervention and rehabilitation therapy. The project would require me to work closely with both neurosurgeons and rehabilitation specialists, to coordinate clinical trials, and to potentially develop procedures that could revolutionize treatment for thousands of patients." It was the kind of opportunity that typically came to physicians years into their careers, not medical students. Over the following months, I immersed myself completely in the research, spending 12 to 14 hours daily in laboratories, surgical suites, and rehabilitation centers. The work was exhausting but exhilarating, combining everything I had learned about brain science with real-world applications that could dramatically improve patients' lives. Our preliminary results were so promising that Dr. Chen suggested we submit our findings to the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious publications in medical literature. "Sarah, I want you to be the lead author on this paper," he said, an honor virtually unheard of for a medical student. "This research represents your vision and your methodology. You've earned the recognition." Writing the paper required months of additional work, verifying data, conducting statistical analyses, and crafting arguments that would convince the journal's reviewers of our findings' significance. When we finally submitted the manuscript, I felt like I was launching my professional reputation into the academic stratosphere. The acceptance letter from the New England Journal of Medicine arrived 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning in March during my 4th year of medical school. Reading the editor's comments about our groundbreaking approach to neural rehabilitation and potential to revolutionize treatment protocols, I experienced a moment of pure professional triumph that nothing in my previous life had prepared me for. But what made the moment even more significant was its timing. That same week, I received an invitation that would give me the platform to showcase my achievements in a way that would be impossible for anyone to ignore, including my family. The invitation came from the American Medical Association, asking me to deliver the keynote address at their annual Young Physicians Excellence Award ceremony. The event would be attended by medical professionals from across the country, including many of the most influential figures in American healthcare. Ms. Mitchell, the invitation read, "Your innovative research and academic achievements as a medical student have established you as one of the most promising young physicians in the country. We would be honored to have you share your insights with our national audience." As I held the invitation, I realized that I had reached a level of professional recognition that would command attention from anyone who understood the significance of medical achievement. This wasn't a local honor or a university award, this was national recognition from the most important medical organization in America. The ceremony was scheduled for October 15th, exactly 7 years after my high school graduation. The symbolic resonance of the date wasn't lost on me, almost to the day. 7 years after my family had chosen not to attend my academic achievement, I would be standing before the nation's medical elite as a recognized leader in my field. But as I began preparing for what would be the most important presentation of my career, I realized that I had an opportunity to do something that would give my professional triumph even deeper personal meaning. I could extend an invitation to my family to witness firsthand what they had dismissed as insignificant 7 years earlier. The question was whether I truly wanted them there to share in my moment of triumph, or whether I was more interested in giving them the chance to experience what it felt like to realize how much they had underestimated someone they claimed to love. As I sat in my apartment that evening, looking out at the San Francisco Bay and reflecting on the journey that had brought me from that devastating morning in our Connecticut kitchen to this moment of professional recognition, I realized that my motivations had evolved beyond simple revenge or validation. I genuinely wanted to give my family the opportunity to see who I had become, not because I needed their approval, but because I wanted them to understand the magnitude of what they had chosen not to support. I wanted them to experience the pride they could have felt all along, if they had been willing to recognize my potential. More importantly, I wanted to give them the chance to be the family I had always hoped they could be. Success had taught me that the sweetest victory isn't making others feel bad about their mistakes. It's giving them the opportunity to recognize those mistakes and choose differently going forward. With that realization, I picked up my phone and began composing the most important invitation I would ever send. The invitation I crafted was a masterpiece of professional courtesy layered with personal significance that only my family would fully understand. I spent hours perfecting the wording, ensuring that every detail conveyed both the magnitude of the honor I was receiving and the grace with which I was extending this opportunity to people who had missed my last significant academic achievement. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Jessica," I wrote on my personal letterhead, which now bore the credentials, Sarah E. Mitchell, MD candidate, Stanford University School of Medicine. "I am writing to invite you to attend the American Medical Association's Young Physicians Excellence Award ceremony on October 15th in Chicago, where I will be delivering the keynote address to the nation's leading medical professionals. This honor recognizes my research contributions to neurological rehabilitation and my academic achievements throughout medical school. The ceremony will be held at the Marriott Marquis Chicago, with a reception beginning at 6 p.m. and the awards presentation at 7 p.m. As keynote speaker, I will be discussing breakthrough treatments that could revolutionize care for traumatic brain injury patients. The audience will include department chairs from major medical centers, research directors, and policy makers who influence healthcare nationwide. I realize this event falls on a Saturday, and I understand that scheduling conflicts sometimes make attendance impossible. However, 7 years ago, you made a choice about which achievements warranted your presence, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to make a different choice this time. If you are able to attend, please let me know by September 15th so I can arrange appropriate seating. The AMA has graciously offered to provide accommodations for speakers' families at the conference hotel. With respect and hope for your attendance, Sarah. I read the letter 12 times before sending it, weighing every phrase for its balance of professionalism and pointed reference to our shared history. The phrase, "You made a choice about which achievements warranted your presence," was particularly deliberate, clear enough that they couldn't misunderstand the reference, yet subtle enough to maintain the dignity befitting someone addressing the nation's medical elite. The letter was sent via both email and certified mail on August 20th, giving them nearly 4 weeks to respond and almost 2 months to arrange their schedules. Unlike Jessica's wedding, which had required 8 months of planning, this event only needed them to book a flight and hotel room. I sent copies to Dr. Morse and Dr. Chin, not because I needed their approval, but because they had become the closest thing to family I had in my professional life, and I wanted them to understand the personal significance of this moment. "Sarah," Dr. Morse said when she saw the letter, "this is beautifully written. I hope they recognize what an extraordinary honor this is." "Even if they don't," I replied, "I'll know I gave them the chance." The response from my family came faster than I had expected. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was reviewing surgical footage in the medical library. Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID. "Sarah. Oh my God, I just got your letter. This is incredible." Jessica's voice carried genuine excitement that caught me off guard. "The American Medical Association. Like, the biggest medical organization in the country." "Yes," I said cautiously, waiting to see where this conversation would lead. I showed it to Brandon, and he was like, "Your sister is going to be famous. This is so cool. Of course we'll be there." I already started looking at flights to Chicago. Jessica's enthusiasm seemed authentic, which made me wonder if the years had given her perspective on our family dynamics that she had lacked as a younger woman. "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked. "I'm sure they're thrilled. I mean, this is huge, Sarah. You're basically going to be like the star of this whole medical conference, right?" "I'm the keynote speaker," I confirmed. "It's considered a significant honor in the medical community." "I'm so proud of you," Jessica said, and something in her tone made me believe she meant it. "I know we haven't always been close, but this is amazing. You're amazing." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Jessica asking detailed questions about the ceremony, the hotel arrangements, and what she should wear to such an important event. Her interest seemed genuine rather than performative, which gave me hope that perhaps the evening might be different than I had anticipated. My parents' response came 2 days later, in the form of a phone call from my mother on Thursday evening. "Sarah, honey, we received your invitation," Linda said, her voice carrying a carefully neutral tone that I recognized from childhood. "It sounds like quite an honor." "It is," I replied, matching her neutral tone. The AMA typically invites established physicians to give keynote addresses. It's unusual for them to recognize someone who's still in medical school. "Well, you were always exceptional academically," she said, and I heard something that might have been pride in her voice. "Your father and I are very impressed with what you've accomplished." The phrase, "very impressed," struck me as an interesting choice of words. Impressed suggested surprise, as if my achievements had exceeded their expectations rather than fulfilling them. "So you'll be able to attend?" I asked directly. There was a pause that lasted just long enough to make me wonder if this conversation was going to follow a familiar pattern. "We're looking at our schedules," Linda said finally. "October is always busy for your father with the fiscal year closing at his firm, and I have some work commitments that weekend. But we're certainly going to try our best to be there." The noncommittal response was so characteristic of how my parents had always approached my achievements that I almost smiled. Even faced with an invitation to a nationally prestigious medical ceremony, they were still hedging their bets and maintaining flexibility to prioritize other commitments. "I understand that scheduling can be challenging," I said, keeping my voice professionally courteous. "The invitation mentioned that I need an accurate count by September 15th for seating arrangements. If you're unable to attend, I'll need to know so I can plan accordingly." "Of course, sweetheart. We'll let you know soon." After hanging up, I realized that my parents' response had given me valuable information about how this evening was likely to unfold. Their lukewarm enthusiasm and immediate focus on scheduling conflicts suggested that they still didn't fully understand what they had been invited to witness. The weeks leading up to the ceremony were filled with intensive preparation for what would be the most important presentation of my career. The keynote address was expected to run 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session with medical professionals from across the country. Unlike my previous presentations to specialized academic audiences, this speech would need to communicate complex medical concepts to a broad audience while inspiring young physicians to pursue innovative research. My speech, titled Bridging the Gap: How Surgical Innovation and Rehabilitation Science Can Transform Patient Outcomes, represented 5 years of research and clinical experience distilled into a presentation that would influence medical education and practice policy nationwide. As I rehearsed the presentation, I found myself thinking about the audience I would be addressing: department chairs who oversaw medical education at prestigious universities, hospital administrators who made policy decisions affecting thousands of patients, research directors who allocated funding for breakthrough treatments. These were people whose professional opinions could launch careers or transform entire fields of medicine. The contrast with my high school graduation audience was profound. Where that ceremony had been about celebrating the completion of one phase of education, this event was about recognizing someone who was actively shaping the future of medical practice. On September 15th, the deadline I had established for family responses, I received definitive answers from all 3 family members. Jessica called first. Sarah, Brandon, and I are absolutely going to be there. We booked our flights this morning. I'm so excited to see you speak. My father emailed later that day: Sarah, I will be attending the ceremony. Looking forward to hearing your presentation. Dad. The brevity of his response was typical, but the commitment was clear and unambiguous. My mother's response came last, in a phone call that evening: Honey, I'm so sorry, but I have a critical work presentation that Monday morning, and I just can't risk missing it by being out of town over the weekend. I know you'll be wonderful, and I want to hear all about it afterward. The familiar pattern of my mother prioritizing work commitments over my achievements was so predictable that I felt more resignation than disappointment. Some things, apparently, never changed. I understand, Mom, I said. Work obligations are important. You know I'm proud of you, right? She said, her voice carrying a defensive note that suggested she understood how her absence would be perceived. I know you say you're proud of me, I replied, a distinction that I hoped she would catch. As October 15th approached, I found myself experiencing a complex mixture of anticipation and anxiety that had nothing to do with the professional presentation and everything to do with the personal dynamics that would play out that evening. David Park, who had become my closest friend and romantic partner over the past 2 years, would be attending as my guest. His presence would provide emotional support, but it would also mean that someone who understood healthy family dynamics would witness how my family interacted with my achievements. Are you nervous about your family being there? David asked as we flew to Chicago together the day before the ceremony. I'm more curious than nervous, I said, looking out at the clouds below us. This will be the first time they've seen me in a professional context where they can't diminish or dismiss what I've accomplished. What do you mean? In our family, academic achievement has always been treated as something that shouldn't be too celebrated because it might make me prideful. But this isn't just academic, this is professional recognition from the most important medical organization in America. They can't exactly tell the AMA that they're overreacting to my accomplishments. David was quiet for a moment, processing the dynamics I had described. Sarah, I hope you know that regardless of how they respond, what you've achieved is extraordinary. The fact that they might not fully appreciate it doesn't diminish its significance. I know, I said, and realized that I genuinely meant it. That's what makes this different from high school graduation. 7 years ago, I needed their validation. Now, I'm offering them the opportunity to share in something I've already recognized as meaningful. The American Medical Association conference was held at the Marriott Marquis Chicago, a soaring hotel in the heart of downtown that had been taken over by medical professionals from across the country. The lobby buzzed with conversations about research findings, policy changes, and breakthrough treatments that would shape healthcare for millions of patients. Walking through the conference registration area in my professional attire, a navy blue suit that conveyed both authority and approachability, I felt the confidence that came from belonging in this environment. Other conference attendees nodded respectfully when they saw my keynote speaker badge, and several approached to express their anticipation for my presentation. Dr. Mitchell, said Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of neurology at Mayo Clinic, I've been following your research on cognitive rehabilitation. We're implementing similar protocols at our facility based on your published findings. These interactions reinforced what I had learned over the past several years. Professional respect based on merit felt entirely different from family approval based on obligation. These physicians valued my work because it contributed to their ability to help patients, not because they were genetically related to me. My family arrived in Chicago that afternoon, and we met for dinner at the hotel restaurant. Seeing them in the context of this medical conference was surreal, like watching characters from one part of my life step into a completely different narrative. Jessica had dressed appropriately for the formal event, in a black cocktail dress that struck the right balance between elegant and conservative. Brandon wore a well-fitted navy suit and seemed genuinely interested in learning about the medical conference. My father looked distinguished in his charcoal gray suit, every inch the successful corporate lawyer. His professional demeanor fit naturally into the conference environment, and I could see him evaluating the event with the same analytical approach he brought to business situations. "Sarah, this hotel is incredible," Jessica said as we were seated at our table. "The whole place is full of doctors and medical people. You can tell this is a really big deal." "The AMA conference is one of the most important events in American medicine," I explained. "It's where policy decisions are made that affect healthcare nationwide." "And they asked you to be the keynote speaker," Brandon said, shaking his head in amazement. "That's incredible for someone who's still in medical school." "The invitation was based on my research contributions," I said. "The work I've been doing on traumatic brain injury rehabilitation has caught attention from medical centers around the country." My father leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued by the mention of research with national implications. "Sarah, can you explain what makes your research significant? I'd like to understand what you've accomplished." The question was the first time my father had ever asked for details about my academic work. Throughout high school and college, his inquiries had been limited to general questions about grades and graduation dates. This felt like genuine professional curiosity. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining my research methodology, the clinical trials we had conducted, and the patient outcomes that had led to publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. As I spoke, I watched my father's expression change from polite interest to what appeared to be genuine respect. "Sarah, this sounds like the kind of research that could change standard medical practice," he said when I finished explaining. "How many medical students are conducting research at this level?" "Very few," I admitted. "Most of this work is typically done by established physicians who have completed their residencies." "So you're essentially operating at the level of doctors who have been practicing for years?" "In this specific area of research, yes." I saw my father and Jessica exchange a look that I couldn't quite interpret, but it seemed to convey a shared realization about the magnitude of what I had achieved. The conversation continued through dinner, with my family asking increasingly sophisticated questions about my work, my career plans, and the significance of the keynote address. For the first time in my memory, I was being treated as the expert in the room rather than the ambitious child whose accomplishments needed to be kept in perspective. As we finished dessert, Jessica brought up the subject I had been wondering if anyone would address directly. "Sarah, I want to apologize for something," she said, her voice more serious than I had heard all evening. "I've been thinking about this a lot since I got your invitation, and I realized that we never properly celebrated your high school graduation." The acknowledgement caught me off guard. I had expected this evening to proceed without any direct reference to our shared history. "I was so focused on my wedding that I didn't think about what graduation meant to you," Jessica continued. "That was selfish and wrong, and I'm sorry." My father cleared his throat, a sound that indicated he wanted to add something significant to the conversation. "Sarah, I think we owe you more than an apology," he said. "I think we owe you an explanation and an acknowledgement of what we failed to understand." The formal tone of his voice suggested that he had been planning this conversation, possibly for weeks. 7 years ago, we made a decision that prioritized convenience over celebrating your achievement," he continued. "We told ourselves that graduation was just a ceremony, but we were wrong. We missed the chance to honor what you had accomplished and to show you that your success mattered to us." The admission was more direct and comprehensive than anything I had expected to hear from my family. "What we didn't understand then," my father added, "was that we weren't just missing a ceremony. We were missing the opportunity to recognize that you were already becoming the remarkable woman we're sitting with tonight." The conversation continued for another hour, with my family asking me to tell them about my years at Harvard, my research experiences, and my plans for residency and specialization. Their questions were thoughtful and engaged, suggesting that they were genuinely trying to understand the path I had been walking alone for the past 7 years. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Jessica pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Sarah, I want you to know that I've been following your career online," she said. "I read about your conference presentations and your research publications. I've been proud of you this whole time, but I didn't know how to tell you after so much time had passed." "Why didn't you try?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. "Because I was embarrassed about how we treated you, and I didn't know how to apologize for something that felt so big and terrible," she said. "But watching you tonight, seeing how accomplished and confident you are, I realized that maybe the best apology is just showing up and supporting you going forward." The next evening, October 15th, arrived with the crisp autumn weather that makes Chicago beautiful in the fall. I spent the morning reviewing my presentation notes and conducting sound checks in the hotel's grand ballroom, where 800 medical professionals would gather to hear me speak. The ballroom was elegantly appointed with crystal chandeliers, deep red carpeting, and round tables set with formal place settings. A raised platform at the front of the room held a podium equipped with state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment that would project my presentation to screens throughout the space. As guests began arriving for the reception at 6 p.m., I stood near the entrance greeting colleagues, mentors, and other honored physicians. The diversity of the crowd was striking: physicians from rural hospitals and urban medical centers, researchers from university laboratories and pharmaceutical companies, policymakers from government agencies and insurance organizations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the Johns Hopkins neurologist who had encouraged me at my first conference presentation, approached with a warm smile. "Dr. Mitchell, congratulations on this remarkable honor," she said. "I've been following your research, and the progress you've made since that first presentation is extraordinary." "Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Your encouragement that day meant more than you know." "Well, you've certainly justified my confidence." Tonight's audience includes some of the most influential physicians in the country. You're going to inspire a lot of young doctors. As the reception continued, I found myself surrounded by medical professionals who wanted to discuss my research, share their own experiences with neural rehabilitation, and express their appreciation for being invited to witness what many described as a historic moment in medical education. My family arrived at the reception fashionably dressed and clearly awed by the formal elegance of the event. Jessica wore a sophisticated burgundy dress that complemented the ballroom's decor, while my father looked distinguished in his formal tuxedo. Brandon seemed slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the occasion but maintained his composure admirably. David Park stayed close to my family during the reception, serving as an informal host who could explain the significance of various attendees and help them navigate conversations with medical professionals. His presence seemed to put them at ease and gave them context for understanding the caliber of people who had come to hear me speak. "Sarah," my father said as we gathered for photographs before the dinner service, "I want you to know that I'm beginning to understand what we missed 7 years ago. This isn't just about your individual achievement, this is about recognizing someone who is contributing to advances that will help thousands of patients." At 7 p.m., the conference moderator called for everyone to take their seats for the awards presentation. My family was seated at a table near the front of the room, where they would have an unobstructed view of the podium and could see the screens that would display my research findings. As I was introduced to the audience, I looked out at the sea of faces and felt a profound sense of completion. This moment represented the culmination of years of work that had begun with the decision to prove my worth to people who didn't recognize it, and had evolved into a career dedicated to advancing medical knowledge for its own sake. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, whose groundbreaking research in neurological rehabilitation has already influenced medical practice at institutions nationwide. Dr. Mitchell's work represents the kind of innovation and dedication that defines excellence in American medicine." As I approached the podium, I caught sight of my family at their table. Jessica was beaming with obvious pride, Brandon was applauding enthusiastically, and my father was watching me with an expression of respect and admiration that I had never seen directed toward me before. "Good evening," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. 7 years ago, I learned an important lesson about the difference between recognition and accomplishment. Tonight, I want to share with you what that lesson taught me about the true purpose of medical excellence. The presentation that followed was the culmination of everything I had learned about medicine, research, and the importance of pursuing meaningful work regardless of external validation. I spoke about breakthrough treatments that were giving hope to patients who had been told their conditions were permanent. I shared case studies of individuals whose lives had been transformed by innovative rehabilitation techniques. I outlined the future possibilities for combining surgical intervention with cognitive therapy to achieve outcomes that previous generations of physicians would have considered miraculous. But most importantly, I spoke about the responsibility that comes with medical knowledge, the obligation to pursue excellence not for personal recognition, but because patients' lives depend on our commitment to advancing the field. When I concluded my presentation 45 minutes later, the audience rose in sustained applause that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Medical professionals who had spent decades in practice were acknowledging that they had witnessed something significant, not just a presentation of research findings, but a vision for the future of neurological medicine delivered by someone who represented the next generation of medical leadership. During the question and answer session that followed, I fielded inquiries from department chairs, research directors, and policy makers who wanted to understand how my techniques could be implemented at their institutions. The questions were sophisticated and challenging, requiring me to demonstrate not just knowledge of my research, but comprehensive understanding of medical practice, healthcare economics, and patient care protocols. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my family approached the stage where I was gathering my presentation materials. "Sarah," my father said, his voice carrying emotion I had rarely heard from him, "I owe you an apology that's 7 years overdue." He paused, looking around at the grand ballroom where 800 medical professionals had just witnessed his daughter receive one of the highest honors in American medicine. 7 years ago, we failed to recognize that we were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary, he continued. Tonight, we've seen what you became when you decided to pursue excellence without our validation. Jessica stepped forward, tears visible in her eyes. "Sarah, I'm so proud to be your sister," she said. "Not just because of what you accomplished tonight, but because of who you've become. You're stronger and more successful than I ever imagined possible." As we left the hotel that evening, walking through the Chicago streets toward a late-night celebration dinner, I realized that my carefully planned revenge had transformed into something entirely different. Instead of forcing my family to acknowledge what they had missed, I had given them the opportunity to witness what was possible when talent met determination and unwavering commitment to excellence. The invitation they were meant to miss had become the invitation that allowed them to finally see me clearly, not as the daughter whose achievements needed to be kept in perspective, but as the physician whose work was already making a difference in the world. 6 months later, I received my acceptance letter for neurosurgery residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital, one of the most competitive programs in the country. The letter was addressed to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, MD, acknowledging that I had successfully completed medical school with the highest honors. But the correspondence that meant the most to me arrived the same day, a handwritten note from my parents. "Sarah," it read, "we wanted you to know that we've been telling everyone about your keynote address at the AMA conference. We're proud of what you've accomplished, but we're even more proud of who you've become. We hope you'll allow us the privilege of supporting your success going forward. We promise to be better family members than we were 7 years ago. Love, Mom and Dad." The note was signed by both parents and included a postscript from Jessica, "Can't wait to call you Dr. Sarah. Love you, sis." As I read their words, I understood that the most satisfying revenge had been no revenge at all. Instead, I had achieved something far more meaningful. I had built a life so successful and fulfilling that it created space for forgiveness, growth, and the possibility of genuine family relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The girl who had been told her graduation wasn't important enough to attend had become the woman whose professional achievements commanded attention from the nation's medical elite. But more importantly, she had learned that the greatest victory isn't making others acknowledge your worth. It's knowing your worth so completely that their acknowledgement becomes a gift you can choose to accept rather than a validation you desperately need. Today, I serve as the Chief of Neurological Innovation at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where I continue the research that began in Dr. Morse's laboratory at Stanford. My techniques for combining surgical intervention with cognitive rehabilitation have been adopted by medical centers worldwide and have improved outcomes for thousands of patients with traumatic brain injuries. But the achievement I'm most proud of isn't the publications, the awards, or the professional recognition. It's the family dinners we now share every few months, where my parents ask thoughtful questions about my work and express genuine interest in my life. It's the relationship I've built with Jessica, who has become one of my closest friends and most enthusiastic supporters. It's the knowledge that my initial desire for revenge transformed into something much more powerful, the capacity to forgive, to grow, and to create the family relationships I had always wanted. The invitation they were meant to miss became the invitation that allowed us all to find our way back to each other. And that, I learned, is the sweetest victory of all. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph over family adversity. Have you ever experienced favoritism or neglect from family members? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire others who are facing similar challenges. Remember, your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it, but by the impact you choose to make in the world.